Democracy may often burden a nation and frustrate its people, but whatever that strain is felt, whether it's to economic backlash, economic harmful damages, and all of that stuff, you should note that the main crux why we have democracy in the first place is for the power or for the people of that state to practice their own sovereignty on how their state should be governed. So therefore, it is a very crux reminder that the very foundation upon which the entire system of democracy function is through the voting that is built upon the will of the people. The problem in the status quo, despite the fact that we have levers of checks and balances, it's easily gerrymandered by politically strong individuals like Donald Trump and Sara Duterte, for example. That's why it becomes harder and harder for us to keep them out of power, and we say that we don't need to endure these practices for a long time. Since, for example, in their side, there's only 3 years left before Sara Duterte left the office. But before they end their term, a lot of harmful damages and democratic backsliding happens during these periods, which are a much more harder harm that should be fixed within the status quo. Because it doesn't happen. Sure, they can be impeached in both sides of the house. But what happens afterwards? They can still rebuild their own nation afterwards. But in our side, it is exclusively betted that it's only in our side where they can free from all of the authoritarian regimes that they have right now that literally harms their own democracy. Like presidents creating executive orders that favors their political will. So in the next election cycle, it will be easier for them to lobby and fracture democracy. Things such as selective subsidies, targeted regulatory relief, and last-minute spending programs that entrench partisan loyalty and make democratic institutions increasingly serve factional survival rather than the broader public interest that we protect. This is the reason why the conditions that we have right now in the status quo doesn't improve. Because sure, people know that Rodrigo Duterte should have been removed in the power back then, but keeps on getting delayed and thrown out by senators who vote in these impeachment cases because they don't really represent the will of the people, to the point that ICC needs to intervene for the Philippines just for him to be placed in trial. So in the systems of the status quo, a president, chief justice, or any other official often survives not because the public thinks that they're innocent, the public thinks that they're doing their job, the public thinks that they're not doing atrocious thing with their political lobbying, but because they control a party bloc that remains unresponded and unfixed inside opposition, those patronage network and coalition bargain inside the parliament. Allo said that impeachment happens in emergency. Untrue. Oftentimes in democratic system, you have two chambers deciding for the facts and justiciability of this. And oftentimes, even the judiciary gets involved with the impeachment charges unconstitutional. The case from them relies on the MEC that are filled with disingenuous attempt. Like literally, as a law student, this is so insulting. You have months of preparation for impeachment trial, for articles of impeachment, for the real trial of the impeachment itself. It is only decided by the people in our side. The decisive factor is literally shift in our side, but all of those formal procedures will still remain. So therefore, they cannot just simply claim that, maybe you're harming Sara Duterte because you're not allowing him, or you're not allowing them to rebut all of the disingenuous attempt. This might lead to a reckless democracy. That's not really the case, because we still have time for them to present their evidences, to present their statement, but it's only the people who will actually vote. Because the margin of difference of the delta in our side is that we literally remove all of the incentive for executive leaders, for example, to control the parliament in order for them to create a lot of political bloc in order for them to keep in power. Because literally, we wash out that incentive because we put that on the people, and the people in themselves can control how they want to be governed. So that is the very essence of democracy. So the comparative here is simple. Even if DLO says, or DLO might expand that, representatives are elected to decide hard cases, yada, 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 our answer is that representatives still do the hard filtering, but they should not be the final owners of this verdict when the issue is whether public mandate or constitutional trust should continue. Sure. PY.
Why do politicians make any decisions at all?
The reason why in this specific land, like I'm going to explain the context. Impeachment is already understood as a special political process. Unlike what Op said, it is not an ordinary judicial proceeding. That is the real matter. The reason why politicians vote for this impeachment cycle is not because of their expertise, because these are not the evidentiary cases. Like literally, the judicial branch handles that. It's because they should represent the will of the people. The problem is, you should answer, they really represent the will of the people in terms of cases wherein a lot of political backsliding already happening, a lot of democratic harms already happening? Do you really represent the people when there's a lot of protests daily that literally might result to revolution here right now in the Philippines because you don't really co-opt to the public interest. You only co-opt to how your factions will survive, yada yada yada. So while in our side, the evidentiary assessment may benefit from institutional expertise like the judiciary branch, the ultimate decision is political in character, just like what happens right now in the status quo, because it concerns whether a public official should continue to hold power and public trust. And we say that the final judgment is better vetted on the people at large rather than party blocks, precisely because the people are the original source of that power in the first place. And the official's democratic mandate is to serve them at the very end of the day. So the same electorate that confers power should have the capacity to withdraw it when that trust is fundamentally broken. So why is the very procedure of this better than the status quo? This procedure is better than the status quo because it gives a public a lawful and direct high threshold. But then they say, like, they have a literal claim here that, oh no, media attention will make this harder and harder. Therefore, it might be, more chaotic in nature. I want to note, in both sides of the debate, you will have a media that calls out a lot of atrocious things. Especially impeachment cases are super, super scandalous in nature. In both sides of the house, it will be dramatized. The problem is those dramatic attempts in their side wouldn't really create any solution of change at all. So you get less happier and less representative state to the point wherein you have a lot of people that fights within each other in order for them to fight for their own democracy. That's why it's harder for them to create channels of democracy, because let's see what happens when a very corrupt president is not impeached. Literally, ask the people during Marcos Revolution, ask the people in other Southeast Asia who literally create the newer revolution. The problem is it reached to the extreme, to the point that they know that they're being fucked by their own state. It will lead to a harsher and heavier battle wherein they need to risk their life, they need to fight their own military or combatant that is far harder in order for them to just force the accountability that they should have in the first place. And we say that is a very, very harmful work, and you are building a very atrocious world for your own electorate.